The Mentalist looks like a detective series built around one extraordinary talent. Patrick Jane can read people better than anyone else. He notices tiny details, understands human behavior, manipulates suspects, and somehow finds the truth when everyone else is lost. But the deeper you go into the series, the harder it becomes to trust the man solving the cases. Jane is not simply hiding information from criminals. He is constantly hiding information from his colleagues, his enemies, and even from himself. His entire life after the murder of his wife and daughter is built around one obsession: Red John. And that obsession changes the way he sees justice, truth, people, and even his own abilities. The show keeps asking us to believe certain things about Patrick Jane, but again and again, his actions reveal something completely different. These are 8 of the biggest lies the Mentalist made us believe. 1. Jane wants justice. Jane often presents himself as someone who wants Red John brought to justice, but his actions make it clear that justice was never his real destination. From the beginning, his goal is personal. Before Red John killed his family, Jane had built his career pretending to be a psychic, and his public arrogance helped put him on the killer's radar. After the murders, Jane doesn't simply want Red John identified and arrested. He wants to be the one who delivers the punishment. That is why he repeatedly takes enormous risks, ignores the legal process, and keeps pursuing suspects even when the investigation puts other people in danger. When Timothy Carter appears to be Red John, Jane doesn't arrest him and wait for confirmation. He kills him himself in front of witnesses. That decision tells us everything. A man seeking justice would want the truth established beyond doubt. Jane wants revenge, and he spends years using the language of justice because admitting that revenge controls him would force him to confront how much of his life has been consumed by hatred. 2. Jane is a psychic. The entire premise of Jane's character depends on something fascinating. He spent years making people believe he could communicate with the dead, even though he knew he couldn't. After joining the CBI, he does almost exactly the same thing, only with a different audience. He doesn't claim to possess supernatural powers anymore, but he performs his deductions in a way that makes them look almost impossible. He watches body language, notices tiny changes in expression, studies people's clothing, remembers details other people ignore, and then presents the conclusion dramatically enough that suspects begin believing he knows more than he actually does. Jane understands that people don't need proof of supernatural ability. They only need to believe that he has information they cannot see. That is what makes his performances so convincing. His real talent isn't reading minds, it's controlling what other people think he knows. The irony is that Jane's past as a fake psychic isn't just background information. It is the foundation of his entire investigative method. He learned that if you control the perception of the people around you, you don't need supernatural abilities to make them reveal the truth. 3. The CBI is protecting. Jane often appears to be the strange outsider inside the CBI, but over time the organization becomes essential to his hunt for Red John. Lisbon's team gives him access to crime scenes, databases, suspects, police authority, and information he could never obtain alone. Officially, Jane is helping the CBI solve murders. Unofficially, he is using the entire organization as a tool in his personal investigation. He withholds information when it benefits him, manipulates investigations to test his theories, and repeatedly allows his colleagues to walk into situations without knowing the full truth. Lisbon knows Jane is reckless, but even she doesn't always realize how far his obsession has taken him. What makes this especially interesting is that Jane genuinely grows attached to the team, so his manipulation isn't completely cold. He cares about them while still using them. That contradiction is one of the defining characteristics of his personality. The CBI may think it is employing Jane because he is brilliant, but the truth is that Jane has spent years turning the CBI into an extension of his own hunt. 4. Jane can always read people correctly. The series repeatedly presents Jane as the smartest person in the room, but one of the most important lessons of the Red John story is that Jane can be wrong. His confidence becomes dangerous because he trusts his own interpretation so completely. The clearest example is Timothy Carter. Jane becomes convinced that Carter is Red John and acts before the truth is fully established. Carter appears to know details connected to Jane's family. He behaves like the killer, and Jane believes he has finally solved the mystery. But he is wrong. Carter is connected to Red John, yet he is not Red John himself. Jane kills him anyway. That mistake matters far more than one failed theory. It proves that Jane's greatest strength can become a weakness when emotion takes over. He is so desperate to end the search that he stops questioning the conclusion he wants to be true. The man who can read everyone else is suddenly unable to read his own obsession. And if Jane can make a fatal mistake while believing he has perfect control, then his confidence may be just another illusion. 5. Red John is just one man. For a large part of the series, Red John feels like a single criminal hiding somewhere in the shadows. Jane imagines that if he can identify the right person, everything will finally make sense. But the investigation gradually reveals something much more dangerous. Red John is connected to a network of people who help protect his identity, manipulate investigations, destroy evidence, and influence law enforcement. The Blake Association turns the mystery into something much larger than a single serial killer. This explains why Jane can solve one puzzle only to discover another waiting behind it. Every time he gets close, someone else appears to protect the secret. That means Jane has spent years chasing one face while fighting an entire system. More importantly, it explains how Red John repeatedly seems to know things he shouldn't know. Jane is not simply dealing with a brilliant killer. He is dealing with a structure designed to make the killer almost impossible to reach. The biggest misunderstanding is thinking that removing the man automatically destroys the machine surrounding him. 6. Jane is hunting. Red John. The relationship between Jane and Red John becomes one of the strangest parts of the series because the hunt goes both ways. Jane believes he is studying Red John, but Red John is also studying Jane. The killer understands that Jane's greatest weakness is not his intelligence or his arrogance. It is his need for closure. Red John repeatedly exploits that weakness by leaving clues, manipulating people connected to Jane, and revealing just enough information to keep him moving forward. Instead of disappearing completely, Red John occasionally makes his presence known, because he understands that Jane will follow even the smallest trace. That turns the investigation into a psychological game. Jane believes every clue brings him closer to the truth, but some clues exist because Red John wants Jane to see them. The hunter therefore becomes part of the experiment. Red John doesn't just want to escape Jane. He wants to understand how far Jane is willing to go. And the terrifying part is that Jane keeps proving him right. 7. Killing Red John. Will fix Jane. For years, Jane behaves as though Red John is the final obstacle between him and peace. He believes that once the killer is identified and punished, the pain will finally have somewhere to go. But revenge cannot restore the people Jane lost. It cannot erase the years he spent obsessed with the investigation, and it cannot return him to the person he was before the murders. When Jane finally discovers that Sheriff Thomas McAllister is Red John, the confrontation becomes brutally personal. Jane traps him, forces him to admit who he is, and ultimately kills him with his own hands. He gets exactly what he wanted. Yet the moment is not triumphant in the way we might expect. There is no magical release from the past. Jane is still Jane. His wife is still dead. His daughter is still dead. The years are still gone. Killing Red John ends the hunt, but it does not heal the wound. That is why the victory feels strangely empty. Jane spent years believing that eliminating one man would end his suffering, only to discover that revenge can end a life without ending grief.